I wanted to try India out. My thought with India is that I could use naval power and push really good control, kind of the idea of, have a naval capital. So the idea is that I want to be able to get my capital to a nice developed naval area. And I started the game and look at my options. And I also think Orissa is going to be a good choice. But then I noticed that Vijayanagar has a nice, we'll call it a national idea, but it's one of their unique techs. They essentially just start with -10 proximity impact. And since it's a modifier that we value a lot, I was like, okay, we'll try Vijayanagar. And I look around and I kind of noticed that Orissa looks like a really good spot for a capital. And it has a lot of development, so that's kind of what I'm thinking. Okay, I need to go invade them. There's maybe a possible war. And then of course, to our north is this Giga Delhi. So we're kind of like, oh, we're not want to mess with them. I take a look at Orissa and I realize it's going to be like extremely difficult. When I pull up the proposal of war screen, it's like they super outnumber me. So I'm kind of like, okay, maybe Orissa's not the way. So I kind of look around at development, and I note that there's a nice developed province somewhere over here with this guy. So I just go ahead and take my first war. We're going to go ahead and declare on this guy over here. But before we start, let's talk about our numbers, just to kind of give you guys numbers of what we're going to start the campaign with. We've got 2.5 million pop, 750 ducats. We start with a nice income, maybe something around 15 a month. We're not really in a rough starting position. In fact, you could say we're in a pretty good starting position. And again, we start the game with that proximity cost already given to us. It's an age 1 research that's already been researched to kind of understand how that works. Going to war with this guy over here is our first war because we want to get to the coast. The reason being is because we want to dev province. If we dev a province on the coast very well, it's going to help us get a lot of controls to different coastlines. And we don't really have a great option to start. Technically, I could start over here, but this is a 19 dev province, so it would be kind of tough to get to where we want it to get to. But the idea is we just need to find a nice province to move our capital to. So we go to this first war, and it's pretty straightforward. We don't even annex them completely. We simply go over here and just kind of take a little bit of land, trying to get a little bit of coastal land. So it looks like something like that. And the war is fairly easy, of course, because he doesn't really have any good allies. And this is going to be our first parliament. Go ahead and call this war. To note, we do get a opportunity to fight Delhi, but it doesn't look very possible. It's showing me that I basically have like a less than 10% chance of winning. So where I do get that event, I don't really go for it, but I do get part of the situation, the fall of Delhi. I don't really know what's going on here though. Kind of a little confused by it. So I'm kind of just, doing my own thing, not really paying too much attention to the fall of Delhi, but maybe looking for opportunities if they come up. And then for our second war, we go over here. And the idea is that, again, we just really want to get good control of the coast. And what I don't realize at the time is that I'm actually declaring war on these people here. So this war is actually very difficult, and we lose a lot of pops to this. I mean, this guy is a lot stronger than this guy is going to give me a hell of a time. He's got lots of levies, and he's just pushing in. And I kind of disabled my forts to save money, and we didn't siege down, and it's kind of a mess. But it's pretty difficult, pretty enjoyable war, I guess I could say. And we get to the point where I kind of think this is a weird thing about EU5 is that the AI often will not stay in war, that they want to separate peace out way quicker than they would in EU4. And so I'm actually losing the war pretty significantly. And I know that I'm at -27% war score. But this doesn't really matter too much in the long run because this guy is just willing to wipe peace after about a year and a half, which I'm glad to take. And then that just leaves these couple of people here. And, these guys versus me is no chance. Even though I was losing the war, I'm easily able to annex both of them. I didn't co-belligerate the second guy, but I kind of just say, whatever. Whenever I take land, I'll give it to subjects so they can integrate it for me. Because I don't want to waste the cabinet action doing that. So you can imagine, I think it's probably about 3, maybe 4 subjects. And later on, I will integrate these subjects and then realize that I can't really culture convert. So over here, when I do integrate these guys over here, and I want to move my capital over there, I run into an issue that I can't integrate properly. When I say integrate, I actually mean core. So I can integrate when, I've annexed a subject, integrated them, but I can't core it because it's not my culture. And I don't have the diplo capacity to accept more cultures. And unfortunately, my cultural influence is really low. So I'm getting a negative modifier where I have a -50 based on my cultural influence versus their cultural tradition. So this is something that I'm going to have to work on because I did want to move my capital and start developing, but I can't properly core the province, and therefore I won't be able to move my capital and get going with all that. And so I started building a bunch of libraries as much as I can and, building up my nation. And I make a ton of money. Maybe think of someone like Castile, pretty wealthy to start the game. Maybe within the first few years, I immediately am making something like 50 a month. And then the Black Death hits. And since I'm doing so well with my economy, I'm going to go ahead and just build pest houses as much as I can. I'm basically just, I'm going to spare no expense to stop the Black Death from hurting me as much as possible, which is nice because a lot of times you're in a situation where you can't do much. But in this case, I'm able to limit it as much as possible. So as time goes on, we're going to just kind of be looking to take coastal provinces. So we're going to go ahead and declare war over here. And we have allied to this guy over here, and he's kind of blobbing, and you may be taking some of this land over here. And so he's actually a pretty useful ally to have. And he often can help me against wars whenever I have to fight this guy. Because a lot of times this person will be allied to the people I'm trying to attack. And that'll be pretty helpful to have him called in, and it makes things a bit easier for me. So we kind of just keep conquering the coast a little bit. So we're kind of just thinking like, maybe taking stuff like this. Again, this will all go to subjects first, but I'm kind of just trying to take down these little nations, path of least resistance type of thing. And, eventually we're kind of just going after all this coastal stuff because we are planning to move our capital eventually. And as soon as we're, able to resolve our culture issues, then we're hoping to be able to do that. During this time, the Sultanate of Delhi kind of starts fracturing. He releases a Manas over here, which is like a pretty large, just like vaguely drawing the borders. I'm not, 100% sure on it, but something like this. And what happens is they get independence, but then Delhi decks on them and gets a lot of AE. And what's really interesting is that Delhi gets so much AE that other people coalition him, and that means that they're going to not be so likely to coalition me. So it's kind of a weird thing. Like, kind of Delhi, things break away from Delhi, and he goes to reconquest them, and he takes a lot of AE getting them back as subjects. But anyhow, Delhi does take Batmanas back as a subject. But at some point, we look at this war, and it looks doable, especially with this ally over here that's kind of grown in size. You imagine that he's got a bit more land here, so he's looking like a pretty strong ally. And I'm thinking that we can probably do this. Me and him can take down Delhi, especially when Delhi has all these disloyal subjects. So we go ahead and get a claim on Batmanas through our parliament, and we go ahead and declare that war. To note about this war, Batmanas is actually disloyal, and we're declaring on him directly. And it's interesting because Delhi is the war leader, but we can separate peace Batmanas because he's disloyal. And so actually able to take a lot of war score, 100 war score worth from this guy. And we're going to be targeting more of coastal stuff, something like that. Again, we're kind of always focusing on this coastal route because we're planning to move our capital. And we have been building a lot of libraries and universities, and these help with cultural tradition. And something fun to note about these guys is they actually do have elephants, and they're actually pretty strong. Though you have to make sure that you have enough elephants to kind of make it work. They also have an interesting building that gives you plus 33% levy capacity from an area. So we can lean into levies pretty hard with these guys, and we don't really need a large standing army to start with. And this is a unique tech to the region, this type of military building that gives you extra levies. Now, a strange thing happens later on. We get an event to ask Batmanas to be our subject, even though he's currently a subject of Delhi. And we go ahead and click that, and he just becomes our subject instead, which is strange, but we'll take it. It was weird because it actually stayed Delhi's color for like a couple months, and then it flipped over to my color after. So I don't know if that was intended or how that worked, but I was happy to have a free subject in Batmanas, even though he's going to be a pretty big and disloyal subject. And I also noticed something that there's a pretty high developed province over here, and I can accept that culture because it's not as large as this culture over there. So actually finally able to get our capital over here, and we're going to start developing that province. So this is going to be our new capital eventually, pretty soon here. We're kind of avoiding fighting this guy south of us, and we're kind of just going for the coast because we know even if we took that land, we're not going to get much value. So we're really just kind of going to these wars, slowly chipping away at these guys on the coast. And we even take the little island down there. One thing interesting about this island is that it's actually a little problematic for us because the island is very Sunni, but also Theravada. And so it's really hard to core that land because you have to have 50% of your religion as primary. And we're not particularly good at converting religion because we're focusing on converting culture. And if you guys remember, there's a kind of a slider, and on one end you have spiritualist, and the other hand you have humanist. And one makes you good at converting religion, and the other makes you good at converting culture. So it's kind of hard to do both. So we have a bit of a pain point on converting that island. It takes us quite a bit of time, but that's okay. Just something I wanted to note. We're also going to switch to a different branch of Hindu, the one that Majapahit had, because we played Majapahit before, and we knew that they get diplomatization cost, and you get 20%. So I was thinking, well, I have all these subjects. This would be a good idea to switch to that. So we go ahead and pay the 50 stab to switch to that at some point. That's just going to be helpful to annex our people a bit faster. As these guys, we also get an event that's going to give us plus 10 to humanist. Every so many years, you get this event, and it's really nice. It kind of makes it so by the 1500s that we're able to have max humanists, which again means that we're really, really good at converting culture. But at the same time, we're really bad at converting religion. And again, that's kind of why I mentioned that's kind of a pain point. I will mention that India seems to have really good culture and religion conversion compared to, say, Europe. So we get a lot of random texts that'll be like plus 10 to religious conversion or something like that that are kind of unique to these guys, or maybe plus 10 culture conversion. And one thing to note is that we're stacking centralization because we're trying to stack proximity impact. And it won't be until maybe 1460 that we're actually able to move our capital. And I guess before we get to 1460, I did want to mention that we get technology a lot slower over here because obviously we're in India. Roughly, it took me about until 1400 to have all of the institutions embraced. I believe the others actually came earlier. Like you got two of the other ones early. We're not able to get banking for a while. And the reason this is relevant is because there is a certain naval building that we're looking for. We're not going to be able to get that for a bit longer till about 1400. And so where I did plan to become kind of a naval nation and move my capital, I wasn't able to really do that again until like 1460. So again, that's quite longer than expected. I was hoping to do that way earlier, but it just didn't really work out that it would be worth it until then. I kind of want to explain how we're able to get such good control around our nation, because that's kind of the point of playing this way and moving our capital, is that on every province on the coast, we can make into a city. There's two different types of naval buildings you can build, and each one's going to give 10 proximity fact. And actually, you can upgrade one of them each age. So by the time it's around 1550, you can actually get 30 proximity impact from one of the buildings, and then another 10 from the other. Couple that with our national ideas and also centralization, and you can see that we're really able to stack this modifier. This makes it so we're not very impacted by the proximity of going to these different areas, which makes it so we have really, really good control, especially around the coast, but also pushing inland with roads. So that's going to be a huge part of the play pattern here, just that we're going to be making a ton of money because we have such good control in India, and India has a lot of value, a lot of population. I want to say this campaign was a lot of fun. The issue, I guess, would be is that we got so rich that the game, kind of gets to that point where you're just the strongest nation in the game, and no one can really contest you. And again, that's mostly done through having such high control within the area. So I'll kind of show you where we end the round and just kind of what it looks like is that, we kind of have something like this. We have 26 million pops in the year 1588. If we use Parliament to raise taxes, we can be making over 4,000 a month. And we're sitting on 121,000 in the bank. We have all 5 hegemons. And even though bailiffs have been nerfed, we don't need to use those because with the level 2 roads and our really, really insane modifier stacking, of the 300 locations that we own, there's no province that has worse than 50 control, which is a huge part of why we're so rich. We also have more than triple the next guy's army. So our standing army is just absolutely massive. Kind of get to this point where we are just so rich, such a big army that we just kind of start walking over everyone. And, kind of by that point, things aren't as interesting anymore. And so I go ahead and just wrap up the campaign. To wrap up, I just want to include a couple notes that I made along this campaign. There's a strange event with the fall of Vijayanagar where if your capital gets sieged and you re-siege it, you get an event to sack your capital, or you can choose to not for 10 prestige. And this is repeatable. It's just funny because I don't think Vijayanagar should get the fall of Vijayanagar themselves, right? It's an event for sieging out their capital, but in this case, I was just re-sieging it from people. So it's kind of weird, and you can get 10 prestige time. Again, didn't abuse this, just kind of noted a little bit of a glitch. And I did want to talk about the strange way that the provinces work. And just to compare this to Europe, provinces, are kind of like a state in EU4, and India has massive provinces compared, which can be really handy because let's say you want to integrate area, and this is like one state, and then it would be like, something like all of these provinces, in this kind of area are one state. So it's kind of different than Europe. I don't know why it's like this, but they have these really big states. And that's just a major difference from playing in Europe. They also just have a lot more population. I mean, this translates into making more money, I suppose, in some sort of way. As far as land goes, I only have this much land. It's not a ton of India. I already have 25 million pops. It's pretty crazy. Just in comparison, I could probably have all of Iberia, France, and England, and I might not even have that many pops. It's kind of just a ton of population that's consolidated into a smaller region. There was an event for me to become a Theravada when I took that little island down here, which was interesting. And I just wanted to point that out. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Try to make it short and sweet for you guys. I will say that I think that you start to snowball a little bit too hard to the point where, you're left in a situation where you're just the strongest nation around and the challenge is kind of gone and then you want to move on. Maybe I'd like to see the naval control and all that sort of stuff just a little bit nerfed. Not crazy nerf, just kind of brought down a little bit so that I didn't feel so powerful so soon. I did want to form this nation here, which is a formable, and they actually have unique ideas that are super valuable. You actually can get another -10 proximity with them, but you have to take 800 provinces, and I really just didn't kind of feel like doing that, especially when I felt like there was no challenge and I was making so much money that I didn't even know what to do with it. We know what you guys would like to see in future runs and what you guys thought of the run. But as always, thanks for watching. Have a good one.